All right, I will call to order the regular board meeting of the Engineering Operations Committee and a special meeting of the Board of Directors of West Basin Municipal Water District. And with that, Mr. General Manager, have the additional form.
Happy to do so, Mr. President. Director Don Deere. Here. Chairman Desi Alvarez.
Here,
Director Gloria Gray. Director Scott Houston. Mr. Chairman, we do not have a quorum of the Board of Directors. However, we do have both members of the Engineering Operations Committee. Therefore, we are able to proceed with our information items.
okay, we will proceed as the committee meeting. And the next item is public comment. So, Mr. General Manager, would you please address that item?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. Chairman, I do not see any requests.
Okay, so we will move on to our presentations. I don't believe we have any. Mr. General Manager.
We have none.
So the next item up is our action calendar and information calendars. There are no items on the action calendar. We do have an information calendar. And I would like to take that out of order and have a presentation on the Hyperion power outage impacts the recycled water operations. Mr. General Manager, please introduce that item.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, item 6.2, as you mentioned, is related to Hyperion power outage impacts recycled water operations. This item does begin on packet page 18 of your committee packets. For this presentation, we have Barkov Masurli and leading us off. He's our Executive Manager of Engineering Operations, as well as Susanna Lee, our Manager of Engineering.
Why don't we start with this one, number 2 instead of number 1?
At the request of the chair.
I posed it on and asked for it because I think it's the more interesting and more critical item that has come up in the last month.
Okay.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, board members. I will just start off the reporting on this particular item by giving kudos to the West Basin team, the VOA team that responded to this event where a power outage on the Hyperion water reclamation, the source of our recycled water program, had impacted our operations. The team that worked on the response took a job at maintaining operation, protecting our facilities and equipment, and also keeping in contact with our customers throughout the process. For more details, I'm going to hand it over to Susanna Lee, our Manager of Engineering.
Susanna, excuse me. Before you begin, I did want to note, Mr. Chairman, the Director Gloria Gray has joined us. She is online. And so therefore we do have a quorum.
Welcome, Director Gray.
Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting.
Thank you, EJ Barkov, and good afternoon, directors. As Barkov mentioned, you mentioned that we had our outage. Hyperion had a power outage on the 8th, and which caused operational impacts to West Basin recycling water facilities. As page 21, on page 21, we begin with just a brief overview on Hyperion power sources supplies. Hyperion has 2 power sources that provide power and electricity to the operations. And one of them is the LADWP power grid. Stated there. And then the other one, they have an internal cogen system. We call it the bioenergy facility, aka digested gas utilization project, and which they short as DIGA. Those 2 systems provide all of their power, internal power for the facilities. And they do have the capacity, the DIGA does have the capacity to provide all of the power for Hyperion needs. So on the in relation to the Santa Ana wind storm and the fire storm on January 8th, LDWP grid began to not provide stable power to Hyperion. And by 2:45, that's when Hyperion's experienced a power loss. And what from our understanding is that when they began to experience the instability in the power, they were trying to switch the primary source to the pickup facility. They went into a pickup and some of the equipment will power up, and which resulted in the full plant power outage. And that was at 2:45. West Basin staff was first notified by Veolia's team, which they also have a projects with Hyperion, and their counterpart Veolia staff notified them, hey, there might be a power outage. So by 4 o'clock, West Basin staff all over to Hyperion CPO and confirmed that there was a plant-wide power outage on their side. So that was at 12 o'clock when the West Basin staff were aware of the power outage on their end. And during that time, we were still receiving import water from Hyperion, that is from the remaining of the gravity flow. So they still have flow in the system. But however, all the treatment facilities already stopped treatment. And so that was about 2 hours in when we find out that the power outage events. So as soon as West Basin staff made aware of the power outage, West Basin and Veolia and all the internal team just have a huddle and decide to begin to provide the next action plans, and we prioritize the membrane facilities, making sure that those are relatively new membranes that will protect those facilities. After Hyperion staff did not have a ETA when the power source will be coming back, and they also emphasized that water quality will be poor and will be heavily impacted because the biological has be impacted for a number of hours. So with those information, West Basin staff decided to slow down and shut down barrier at that point, and we notified all the refineries what is going on. And as if you go to the next page, sorry, it has a timeline of when we start switching to the different portable water. One thing to note is that even though we have notified Chevron refinery, because of the fire situations, and they were not able to get steam units to support the water feeds immediately. And as a result, even though we had requests for reductions and switch over to portable water for water feed, they remain pretty much the regular demand flow for the rest of the night. So I'll go to the next page. The next 2 pages really outline all the different details of the remaining of the event. West Basin staff remain in close contact throughout the whole duration of the event with the refinery customers, as well as Hyperion, trying to get updates on when power will come back and when normal operations will restore. On this page. Originally, Hyperion had notified West Basin staff that the cryogenic units, which provide oxygens to their secondary treatment, come back the following day, just January 9th at 8 p.m. However, they failed to do so, and then that pushed out their recovery time until January 10th. That was Friday. And so on Friday, we remained in contact with refineries throughout Friday and Saturdays, even Sunday, because Chevron and other refineries that want to know whether they can go back to recycled water treating methanol. So we were really happy that we got really close communication with Hyperion, even though they did have a delay in getting their services back online, but they were really responsive to our call and to provide the information that basically, so by January 10th, they get all their facilities back online. They did warn us that because of the extended outage, that the biology would take a few days before it will be recovered. So with that information, we decided to extend the barrier outage until Monday to look at all the water quality, make sure that we can begin the membrane treatment. Overall, the next 2 page is summarize all the impacts to the different water productions. We talking about roughly 27% less during this outage from Hyperion. Obviously, barrier was offline for a number of days until Tuesday of the following week. And then share from the overall is 25% less out of this event. And the next page, please. Chevron Nitrify, they were 100% on potable water on their end. So even though we have the ability to provide up to half their capacity of potable water with potable water cut on our end. But we did request that they be on potable water on their side. Water we swung elbow because that facility is the only facility left with the old MX system and OMM membrane that we recently replaced. We didn't want the deteriorated water quality to affect those membranes. So they got stay on potable water for the whole duration until Tuesday morning. So the whole production was 20% reduced, but it was mainly harmful. And GMM for the beef, with the new CMF system, we have an automated portable connections to that site, so that site was easily to turn on and turn off and switch back between recycled water to potable water. We asked them to reduce production on their end until Friday, and then because we saw the water quality was not as bad as we expected, we had turned that site back to recycled water on Friday on the 10th. Overall, if you go to the next page, water quality wise, if we compare to the 2021 Hyperion quality event, that turbidity went all the way up to 400. As you can see from the 7th, the 8th to the 10th, we see all the instabilities. The worst we saw was roughly around 20 NTU, so that's a better water quality compared to 2021. But for the rest of the events, when the average was about between 12 to 14 NTU. That's why we see that the water quality got stabilized. You see the tail end of that first graph. And we decided that they're safe to return barrier on at that time. And all it's counterfly worst that we saw was in the 25 parts per million. So it is elevated compared to our normal 15 parts per million numbers that we normally see. Ammonia, however, you recall like our normal average these days are at least 55 parts per million. But during this duration, we actually saw better ammonia content. And we reported to Hyperion staff as well, and they were surprised as well. We have low ammonia. So other parameters that we looked at that determined that there was poor water quality coming in was TOC. Normal TOC values ranges between 12 to 15. And at worst, we saw about 10 ppm increase in the TOC. But just want to emphasize that we did have great coordination effort between the customers and then with Hyperion to be able to avert any major damage to our membranes and other assets.
But what is a grab sample?
So it's continuous monitoring. The operator will go out to the location that we do samples at.
See those little jars? Those are grab samples.
Or I'd be happy to answer any question.
I'd like to add a little bit if I may.
Yes, you may.
You know, you can see this trend on the very last slide of turbidity. And I think what's important to appreciate during an event like this is, you know, we're getting information in real time. We don't know how long that trend is going to continue. And the decisions that we have to make as a staff and operators of the recycled water facilities aren't necessarily with the benefit of all of this information in hindsight. And I would like to say it again and as loudly as I can that I think in this event, our staff and our operator did a fantastic job dealing with the information that they had available to them in real time and made decisions that had I think the least amount of impact to our recycled water customers, but also the safest outcome for our facilities. And I want to illustrate that today through this presentation to really not just highlight that there was an upset condition at Hyperion, which we did, I think, have some good communication from Hyperion during this. But they're dealing with certainly real-time information as well for 225 million gallons per day facility. And so, of course, we're all just trying to make the right decisions. And I think in this case, our team did just that. They had a thoughtful approach to each and every customer and how to handle them and whether to reduce them or to convert them to potable. And again, I can't say it loudly enough that I believe our staff has really revealed through this effort that they are ready to respond to the challenges that Hyperion water quality presents.
Who on the staff makes this decisions on these items?
Well, I'd say that Susanna Lee is our new manager of engineering and also responsible for production, is the one that's directly working with Veolia to ultimately vet the information and make the ultimate decision.
Right, well, thank you. Director Gray, do you have any questions?
No questions, just comments afterwards. Thank you.
It's unfortunate that the event happened and a lot was happening in the city of Los Angeles right when the fires were raging up in the Palisades. An incredible response that we've been. I do have a couple of questions, primarily just kind of follow up. One, I think you guys, the right decisions were made in an event like this where you are operating in real time. I would shut down the system. So kudos to you for proceeding in that way. And that would be the precautionary approach to take to make sure that nothing's damaged on our side. And I know that it just happened and you're still analyzing everything. What I would like to see is what are the cost impacts to us having to shut down, restart, and serve potable water, etc. There's obviously costs. And we probably are already working on that, but if that can be brought back in a more comprehensive report that addresses that. The other question is regarding the satellite plants. They're primarily being served with recycled water, and then they do treatment. And I think that we did shut down the satellite plants for a period of time. How much storage do we have at NC Little, if we have storage of this, the recycled water? And how long could we operate the, satellite plants for?
I can answer the first part, but I'll let these guys.
At Two Little Plant, for the Title 22 system, we have 10 million gallons of storage, 2 to 5 million gallon underground reservoirs. We did a study a little over a decade ago that said we have about 4 hours of emergency storage in those reservoirs. In addition to those reservoirs, we have product water tanks at Chevron on their site for the boiler feed. We have 2 of them. One is about 1.5 million and one is about 1 million gallon each. Chevron Nitrified, we have a tank there that's less than 700,000. 700,000 gallons, 600,000 gallons over there. And then similarly to the Torrance Satellite and JMM, we have 2 tanks per water quality on there. I don't know the sizes, maybe.
Yeah, we roughly, for any planning purpose, all of the satellites, we have 4 hours of storage. If we're at the full level, obviously.
Okay, so you won't have the answer right now. So follow-up questions on that. How much storage did we have available at the time of the power failure and shutdown? And if we had about 10 million at SC Little, we have 700,000 at JMM, you said? I don't know how much you have in Torrance. Those plants are only producing about 4 million gallons a day. Individual.
Individually, yes, roughly.
So if we had that and forget Chevron right now, this Title 22 water would be what we would be sending down to the JMM and the Torrance facility. Did we look at that or to keep those plants running? Because it seems like you were almost at that. I mean, this thing sat down for 4 days and but we had storage for probably keeping that running for 2 days.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, President Alvarez, is that we didn't have a complete shutdown of the recycled water program for that entire time. There were some customers like the Torrance Refining Company that we converted entirely to potable water. And that was primarily because it's a very mechanical process where the operators have to go there, disconnect the flange, reconnect it to potable water, and then set them onto potable water in that manner. And it didn't make sense for us on day 2 to guess that we might be able to put them back onto potable. So they remained on potable for, I think, a good majority of the time. Whereas at JMM, the Marathon customer, they never came off of, and correct me if I misspeak here, Susanna, but they never came off of recycled water at all during the entire time. And so it really was, I'd say, to your point about storage, a lot of the decisions that we're talking about weren't as simple as just shutting off the system or not. It was really about maximizing the resources that we had. And, you know, some of that includes supplementing potable water into the Title 22 or disinfected tertiary system to ensure that there's some amount of recycled water being used. And then requesting our irrigation customers, for those that could, to not water for that evening. And so we didn't have a mandatory shutdown of our irrigation customers. We simply said, given what we're dealing with, it'd be helpful if you didn't. And I think a lot of them heeded that call because that very first night, which was going to be the biggest question mark about whether we had enough water, not just through storage, but through potable supplementation and reduction of other customers. We, as far as I recall, we didn't have any blip in the service that we maintained throughout that night. And I believe a fair share of customers still did their watering that evening. Not everybody reduced.
Any customer reviews?
We did get feedback from some customers that voluntarily reduced, they wanted to help out based on the situation.
So, I mean, this does present an opportunity for us to revisit. I don't think that's, something like this has never been dealt with. But every once in a while, things force you to look at operations, et cetera. So, I would like to see a discussion or development of more of a response plan in the event of these kinds of, or of this kind of event happening again in the future. And it might be that you prioritize, just think about, you shut down irrigation because that has the least impact. There's an interest in keeping some of our facilities running, if nothing else, because of the complexity of the facility, et cetera, and turning them on and off. And then how long can we survive for based on the limited storage that we have? So, I get it. I wouldn't have the answers. You don't have the answers, but as you address this and fill in the gaps, maybe we can look at that. Apply that one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, as well as I thought we all handled this situation, the process felt like it should have been more well-oiled, right? And so I think there are always opportunities to improve. And in this case, what we would be looking to for our staff and for Veolia to maybe do better next time would be that, while every one of these incidences is unique, I think we can have a framework of a response plan that says, if this, then do that. And, frankly, that's something that we didn't necessarily have the benefit of right in front of us. I think we made the right decisions, to the ifs that we were presented, but having that guidance and framework in place and then tweaking it as needed in real time based on the actual situation would definitely be an improvement on the next one.
Wait, so I don't know if you can bring back a more complete report next month, but probably enough time. Obviously, we do need the additional costs impact of this.
Yeah, that's right. We need at least one billing cycle because you'll recall that while we sell wholesale potable water to our retailers, they ultimately rebill us for the usage when we have to supplement it. So
Right.
we'll need to see those invoices and use those invoices in order to determine, those costs of potable water in particular, which I think is going to be the largest cost driver in this issue.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, Director Nair? Director,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes, loud and clear.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President, for all that feedback and input. But it's always nice to know that we have extraordinary staff to handle issues like what we're discussing. And so I just want to acknowledge all the staff involved in that and, our entire team, how diligent and committed they are, I believe, in my opinion, and doing extraordinary work when they are faced with any issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item, which is the climate change vulnerability assessment and mitigation plan update. Gentlemen,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll jump back in our packets to packet page 3. And for this item, we have Alejandra Canel Alvarado for the presentation.
Good afternoon, directors. This, as mentioned, is an information item to provide an update and present the overall results for the climate change vulnerability assessment and mitigation plan, or climate change plan, as I will call it, going forward. We go to the next slide, please. So I want to start this presentation by reiterating that the climate change plan, it's a requirement set by the Regional Water Control Board that was included as part of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or the NPDES permit renewal process for the prime permit for two of our facilities, the Edward Little water recycle facility and the Juanita Millender McDonald Carson Regional Plan. Aside from it, there are two objectives that involve the development of the climate change plan. The first objective is to evaluate both short and long-term vulnerabilities related to climate change hazards, such as flooding, wildfire, extreme temperatures, wind, drought, and sea level rise. Given that the evaluation is specific to this climate change risk, the evaluation does not address any other risks, such as earthquakes or pandemics. Within the evaluation, there are three facilities that were included. The facilities are the Hyperion secondary pump station, the ECL facility, and the GMM facility or plant at Carson. The Hyperion pump station facility was included in the assessment to evaluate the resiliency of the system to, again, the climate-related hazards from the start, meaning the source water, to the end, which is the brine discharge at the treatment plants, which is what the renewable permits are for. The second objective is to provide recommended adaptation and mitigation measures that will provide infrastructure resilience to reduce the carbon footprint for these three facilities. If we go to the next slide, slides, please. So the development of the climate change plan was a process that was fairly quick, although new to the district. While the Regional Water Control Board has been providing some provisions to drinking water agencies and cities in the past to prepare this plan, it was until November 2023 that West Basin received a tentative order requiring the development of this plan. So from that moment on, West Basin staff worked on developing the scope of work and really understanding what was this effort and what will entail this effort. On April 11, 2024, a request for proposal was issued under the on-call professional engineering services. By July 15, Hazen and Sawyer was awarded a contract in the amount of $137,242 to conduct the vulnerability assessment as well as the mitigation plan. The kickoff meeting took place on July 31st. And from that moment on, the development of the project took about 4 months and 2 workshops. The first workshop took place on September 10th, and it was to provide the preliminary results of the vulnerability assessment, obtain any feedback, and gather any comments or questions that staff may have. And ENO information presented to the board on October 2024 to provide an update of the progress up to that point. The second workshop took place the same month at the end in October 29 to present the preliminary results for the recommended measures. A final report was complete by December 23rd, 2024. And currently staff is anticipating to submit this report to the Regional Water Board for the NPDES permit by the end of this month. If we go to the next slide, please. To continue this presentation, it's important to distinguish some of these terms that are used, and it can be inter-exchange, but in the context of the climate change plan was important to identify. For the vulnerability assessment itself, the terms of hazard and vulnerability were those that were required to identify. Understanding that hazard is an event or a condition that may cause any injury, illness, or damage to assets. While vulnerability, it's a predisposition to the assets to be adversely affected by the hazards. The hazards meaning like sometimes flooding, drought, the ones that we talked. With these two terms in mind, there are two main focus for gathering information that speed the assessment. The first focus was all the climate data and projections from the nationwide, state, and the region. Ultimately, these data and projections provided what is called the representative concentration pathways for carbon dioxide equivalent concentrations. Those are the RCP, which in other words means different scenarios based on future emissions and foreseen levels that are compared to the heating effect in 100 years. With that in mind, there were three scenarios that were considered. The first scenario is the RCP 2.6, which is the lowest scenario, meaning they represent a future scenario where stringent emissions reductions are being achieved, and there is a global greenhouse gas emissions that are significantly limited. The medium scenario, the RCP 4.5 scenario, represents that middle point between the lowest and the highest concentration points, where the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions peak by 2040. The higher scenario, the RCP 8.5, is consistent with a future in which there are no significant global efforts that limit any of the reductions for emissions. For this assessment, the focus is on the intermediate and the higher, the RCP 4.5 and 8.5. And this is because as we were developing the assessment, it was identified that there are increasing scientific consensus that the lowest emission for the RCP 2.6 scenario is probably not achievable unless that there is a major public political will to reduce all the emissions globally. The second focus point to gather data for the assessment was past experience and events that has been done in these facilities. When the vulnerability assessment was complete, recommended measures were developed. So we have a specific adaptation recommendations with that recommendations that are adjusting to a new climate conditions in order to reduce any risk. And then we have the mitigation measures, which are more processed to reduce any carbon emissions or greenhouse gases emissions that are coming from a system. So having the adaptation and the mitigation measures in the context of the climate change plan, we call it the resiliency measures, which is the capacity for a system to recover from disruption. In the next slide, please. The overall results for the vulnerability assessment shows that we do have a very resilient system based on the hazards that were evaluated: flooding, sea level rise, drought, wind, wildfire. For these three facilities, it was ranked as low, which it means that the system and the assets are relatively resilient to change. It is marginally impacted by climate change impact, or it is even less likely to experience any significant changes. So this is true for most of the hazards at the three facilities that were evaluated, except for EPL when it experienced a level of drought. For this particular category, it was ranked as medium, and this is due to the fact that as we are experiencing more droughts in the region, then there is more conservation efforts and there is more stringent levels for the water demand. So less water might come in the system with poor water quality. So that will put some pressure and will not have the availability to produce a reuse water supply, let's say for a year. The next slide, please. Here's the same, the hazards for wind, wildfire, and extreme temperature are ranked as low, which means that we have a resilient system under the control that West Basin have, and is resilient to any changes. Next slide, please. Once the assessment was complete, and in order to move to the next phase, which was to develop the recommended measures, it was identified that we needed to have a baseline to see what was the baseline for the greenhouse gases emissions that was produced by these three facilities. So for that, a greenhouse gas inventory was conducted. The scope of this inventory took two main focus, which is by any emissions that are direct to West Basin, like such as on-site fossil fuel combustions, emissions from treatment processes, and transportation or hauling related to fuel. And the second point is any indirect emissions, such as purchased electricity. The graph that we are seeing here in the presentation presents the total greenhouse emissions for the operations of the three facilities, Hyperion, ECL, and GMM, for the data that was gathering for the data that was gathering for 2023, with the total emissions shown through the bar chart on the primary y-axis and the average monthly greenhouse gas emissions per unit of inflow water through the line chart on the second axis. Overall, what we see here in this graph is that out of the three facilities, ECL accounts the largest share of emissions with about 86%, followed by GMN with about 14%, while the Hyperion pump station contributes to a minimal of 0.01%. Next slide, please. Specifically for ACL, the greenhouse gas emission as illustrated in this graph, the greenhouse gas emissions are driven by the electricity with about 92-93%, followed by the biosolids hauling and the chemical hauling with like 1%. The biosolids make up about like 7%. And this is due to that the hauling was in a very distant location by the time the inventory was conducted. Next slide, please. For GMN, the greenhouse inventory, it's slightly similar to the one at ECL, having electricity as the main contributor to greenhouse gas emissions with about 99.6%. And the chemical hauling, it does has a very small impact with about 0.4%. Next slide, please. After the vulnerability assessment and the greenhouse inventory were conducted, an additional component identifying where were the existing resilient measures that are or that will take place also took a component here for the identification of any additional mitigation or resiliency measure. These existing resiliency measures were identified per facility at different levels, whether they were facility level, building level, asset level, additional levels. For instance, at a Hyperion for a building level, the district have already taken some steps into upgrading the HVAC system, as well as for the other facilities. At the asset level, there have been already some projects that involve some level of incorporating some shades or canopies, whether it is for the chemical tanks or the membrane units. That's the case, for instance, at the GMM Phase 2 project, which it did incorporate some of those. At the facility level, we already have some infrastructure that it does produce a level of resilience, and that it were included here as a part of these existing measures. And some of those are the storm drainage systems and detention basins that all facilities have. As for the operational level, speaking about the operation itself and the operators, they do have already implemented some emergency action plans as well as fire prevention plans. So those were taken into consideration when looking at the measures. Next slide, please. So with those existing measures in mind, additional short and long-term measures were identified for the three facilities. For the flooding specifically, we looked at not only the projections and the climate database that was involved as part of the assessment, but also specific events that have occurred in the past. That was the case for a Hyperion pump station when a previous operational failure during a heavy event caused the Hyperion plant to overwhelm with debris at the bar screens. And that resulted in some significant repairs that West Basin had to do at the pump station and some recovery and maintenance. Because that was one event, kind of like odd event that occurred, the priority to for these measures was ranked as low. The measure itself here for that particular event was to implement or enhance an asset management program. Same case with ECL, which in February 2024, ECL experienced some localized flooding around a transformer due to a storm drain backup. This event highlighted weakness in the drainage system, and for that, regular inspections and maintenance to their storm drain and detention basins, as well as having some improvements in the like the transformers, it's necessary. And for that, that was included in the report is to inspect and have cleanups in the drainage and detention system, as well as to consider elevating the transformers as a critical component since already an event have occurred. Because of these, the measures were to be medium priority for the short term. Another event that occurred was at GMN where there was the plant experienced flooding on the for an underground pipe breaks, and so because of this, there were some recommendations to improve the grading and inspect the pipes, as well as to implement or take the asset management program. I do want to mention here that while the district has an asset management program, it's more at the work level and it's not relating or it's not related, it's not currently related to this climate change plan. For instance, like we could say that, yeah, there is an X amount of motors, X amount of valves at Hyperion, but we are not really seeing, okay, like in the event of a flooding, like these assets will be at risk. So there is some work that it needs to take place there. And for that, the recommendations were included there. As a long term, because climate continues to progress and the likelihood of the storm surges and high waves increase over time, there could be a potential for flooding that can be extended in areas that are protected. So because that is at risk, then the resiliency recommendation is to participate in periodic flooding maps updates and be updating those as well in our end. For sea level rise and wind, as well as drought, there are not specific resiliency measures as they are outside of West Basin control. For the extreme temperature, as the assessment identified as the climate changes that are increasing or changing more drastically, there are going to be more days with higher temperatures. So the recommendation here is to paint the chemical tanks for a light reflector color. In that way, we'll be reducing the degradation of the chemicals, and that will reduce the heating effect as well as the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions produced by the facility. Another component for the long term was to consider high temperature design standards for outdoor electrical. As we experience more days with high extreme temperatures, then that may put or can put pressure to the equipment and the ACs as well. For the wildfire, there are no specific measures for short term, as we are not in the zone to be at risk. However, because and in an urban area, and that might be experiencing some like electrical fires, then the recommendation is to continue monitoring wildfire protections as well as wind patterns. Lastly but not least, the greenhouse emissions for the ECL and GMM, the resilience and mitigation measures that were included are to consider collaborations with the Southern California and Edison to participate in greener energy sources, as well as for ECL to consider local biosolids handling locations that will reduce the carbon footprint for the system. As a long term, the recommendations were regarding the solar power systems for ECL is to consider rehabilitating the system, especially for to power the membrane units. And at GMM, the consideration is to evaluate any feasibility for a PV system to power the membrane units. The next slide. So the next steps, as I mentioned before, and just to reiterate, is that the staff will submit the plan to the Los Angeles Regional Water Control Board for review in late January. Any regulatory comments will need to be addressed to ensure any compliance with the NPDES permit requirements, or aside from the recommendations that will be submitted at the Regional Control Board. These measures developed in the climate change plan will serve as guidance for future west basin projects. With that, I'll be happy to report that the completion of the task for the development of the climate change plan was done as scheduled and under budget, within a total amount of $86,000, which is had some like the savings of $37,000 according to the budget. I do want to note here that because there might be some comments that need to be addressed, there is an allocated budget out of the $137,000 that was in the budget. There's about $14,000 allocated to respond to any water board comments. So that's outside from the savings of the $37,000. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for getting the project completed on time and on budget. So Director Deere, do you have any questions or comments?
And within budget, that's also very
Yes.
good. No, man.
Very commendable. Director Gray, do you have any questions, comments?
No, it just was a very good report. Thank you.
Okay, I have a common question. If you can go to your slide number 5, where we talk about the assessment, vulnerability assessment on drought. Why is NC little medium? All the other risk levels are low. And I appreciate that a drought will put some kind of burden on our potable water system, but our recycled water system serves primarily industrial users, which are very consistent in and out of drought. And recycled water would be the same in and out, or it appears that it should be the same out in and out of drought. So why categorize that as medium?
Because as conservation will be higher, then there's going to be less water with poor water quality. So that could put a pressure in the system for West Basin to produce a high quality for barrier. So in terms of barrier, then if there is a drought and we are not able to produce like a specific quality water, then might need to like use drinking water, for instance.
So the drought would impact our influent water flow. Right, thank you for that clarification. In terms of flooding, are any of our facilities in a flood zone?
They are not. However, because we didn't only rely on the projections, we also relied on the past experiences. And given that the three facilities have some event in terms of localized flooding, then it was sorry, it was just some of the recommendations to avoid or reduce that risk of like localized flooding.
Right, so really, when you're talking about NC level and flooding, it's just to make sure that everything is free of debris so that any rainfall and runoff can just move off that property without.
Yes, there was one event that it did put, because of localized flooding, it put at risk one transformer at the south part of the facility. So that it was included there as a measure to consider elevating that transformer that at some point was at risk to be not with water.
But it's all due to localized flooding.
Sorry?
It's all due to basically localized flooding. We're not talking about. So, wondering about.
If I may answer, yeah, it's localized. It's really the on-site drainage type of issues that we would have to address. Alejandro touched on ECL and the transformer area. On JMM, we have noticed that there's some localized ponding around the tanks. So it is something that we, at some point, want to come back to the board and see if we want to address those more permanent manner.
So we are really grading.
And only in a portion of the plan, some portion of the plan.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all my questions and comments. So we will move on to the monthly engineering and operations report. So, Mr. Gentleman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this item begins on packet page 28. And for the presentation, we do have Barka Masurlian, our Executive Manager of Engineering and Operations, as well as a host of team members here to present these items. However, I did want to also note that we do have our intern, Mir Mawad, here, who will be presenting a portion of this update. We are very sad to see anybody leave West Basin for new opportunities, but for interns, I think that there's a special pride in seeing them move on and taking on new jobs within the industry. And so Mir will be accepting a position, I believe, with LA County. Is that correct? So
LA County, which LA County?
LA County Sanitation.
LA County
Sanitation. But
Congratulations.
I do want to say a very special thank you to him because my understanding was that he was set to leave us a little bit before this meeting, but agreed to stay on so he could do this presentation because it is very important for all of our interns to take up this opportunity to present to our committees and board members. So I'm going to throw it over to Barka to lead this off.
Thanks, EJ and directors. This month, we're doing the monthly reporting on engineering and operation matters a little bit different. Typically, you've seen two different staff reports, one for operations, one for engineering. We want to start off the year with slightly different formats on packet page 28. Now under the summary, you can see what the proposed format is. This would be a single report for engineering and operations with a quarterly focused update on a few topics. In the summary, you'll see like for January, April, July, and October, we would include a focused presentation on capital projects and technical planning projects. In February, May, August, November, we'd have a quarterly presentation on water distribution matters and water compliance. And then similarly, for the rest of the months, a quarterly presentation on water production and asset management activities. We're hoping that with this new format, the information that we are presenting is more streamlined, more effective, less redundant information. I want to make sure that the information we're providing you hasn't been presented before and that it's valuable information. So welcome all the feedback moving forward in the next few months. If this report needs to be tweaked or added to or adjusted, all the feedback from the committee. So in this format, today we have a focused presentation on capital projects and some of the technical planning projects. But we've committed to, with every presentation, we talk about some of the key issues on operations as well. And you'll see on packet page 28 and 29, the typical bullet points about key activities or incidences related to our operations. A couple of them worth noting today. On packet page 28, we're informed the committee that we have received 4 proposals for the O&M contract, and staff, along with outside panelists, are reviewing them, and we're scheduled to conduct interviews at the end of this month for all 4 firms. Also worth noting out of these bullet points, page 29, the board gave staff direction at the December board meeting to work with our council in response to one of our chemical vendors requesting that we pay him an additional fee, regulatory fee. The board heard the staff's reporting and directed staff and district council to go back and negotiate with the chemical vendor. We're happy to report that our legal counsel did send a letter late December, and we received a letter back from the chemical vendor on January 2nd, indicating that they will honor our contract and continue to serve us with the existing contract and not charge us the additional fee. So
Congratulations. A little pushback doesn't hurt.
thank you for the board's direction on that. Those are the key operational highlights, but there's more in the staff report itself. I would like to kind of move forward into the presentation part of this monthly report. So if we can go to packet page 34. You'll see in the presentation, we start off with a look ahead. The February committee giving the board a heads up on some of the items that might come your way. And then updates for each of the projects, the PV project, the converted filter booster pump station, phase 2 expansion project, that Carson plant, the DCS replacement project, solids handling, and then the Title 22 filter rehab project that is also underway. We also were planning on talking about the Pure Water SoCal term sheet that's coming our way, as well as Veer's presentation on our Bioflow performance evaluation. And then also we always attach our budgetary information for each of the projects. So that's what's in the presentation today. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask board, and we can go through each one of these. But if there are only particular ones that you'd like to hear, this is a good opportunity to let us know which ones you would like to hear specifically. Otherwise, we can go through them one by one.
Looks like we have 10 items that you have listed there, and that will probably all 10. So I will ask our committee and board members if there's anything in particular that they would like to see today or hear about today.
Just what the staff feels is the most important ones. Good enough for me.
And Director Gray, do you have any comment on that? I will throw in my 2 bits of what I would like to hear. And that would be on item and the status on the JMM expansion project. The Title 22 filter rehab. Excuse me. And the Bioflow performance evaluation.
And we'll do those three topics. And we'll start off with switching over to Mr. Kevin Cullen to give us an update on the JMM Phase 2 expansion project.
Good afternoon, directors. I'll start on page 53. Back to page 53, please. Just real quickly, the majority of the recent activities on site are addressing outstanding punch lists and observation items. The picture on the left-hand side is just a simple screen of the HMI for the PLC of the CEMF. The system has been operating well. It's been running consistently. We have been solely using the new membrane filtration system, and you can see here it's producing at this instant about 5,000 GPM. We did have a completion event scheduled for January 9th. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing fires, we were not able to host that event. However, nonetheless, I think the project will be celebrated through, I think, some social media posts that are forthcoming. And I just recently did a recent tally, and to date, we've delivered 35 billion gallons of recycled water to the refinery. So I think that's something to be celebrated. Next slide, please. We are all the way through commissioning. We accepted the CMF on November 22nd. Since then, we've been just trying to address miscellaneous issues with different signals coming from different pieces of equipment, making sure that everything is running absolutely flawlessly before we take full acceptance of all the recent installations. Next slide, please. Here's a list of the outstanding items that are required for that final acceptance. Most notably, we need accurate as-built drawings from the contractor. The final piece that we're working through is the electrical drawings. We've gone through 5 different resubmittals with them, with me and myself having to go out there and count wires, count conduits, and make sure that they're right. Unfortunately, we're getting a little pushback from them on editing them. Again, for the 6th iteration, however, stressing to them the importance of having accurate documents at the end. Additionally, just the regular things, punch list items, cleaning up lead tags, just like cleaning, addressing any equipment that's not operating correctly. Some of those are just being tracked as punch list items and will be transferred over to warranty items. All things that are pretty per usual with operating equipment. We'll do a final site cleaning before they demobilize. And just waiting on some of the final administrative documents, which are still lagging a bit, but nonetheless, they say they're forthcoming. Our final system documentation submittals, asset management sheets, maintenance summary, and lubrication records. So I recently just spoke to the CM this morning, and we're expecting to issue substantial completion Friday, pending addressing a few final loops. And as soon as they can get their administrative documents cleaned up, we'll have a final completion as well. Looking forward to issuing a notice of completion on this project and be happy to take any questions.
Any questions on this project? Director Gray, any questions on this one?
No,
Thank you. And it's been a long time, so it's finally wrapping up. But you are operating the plant right now 100%. We've assumed that responsibility. Okay. Thank you. Next.
Next up is Sir Orlando Rodriguez for the Talisman Tube Filter Rehab Project.
Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and members of the board. Next slide, please. So, this project actually started back in August. We issued a.
Excuse me, what page is that? What page?
Oh, sorry, agenda packet page 64.
Thank you.
Director Deere. We issued a notice to proceed August 1st, 2024. And the first activities for this project was to actually drain the filters and go in and do some field measurements. As you may recall, the key component of the project is the under drain stainless steel laterals. And those are actually custom made and specific to the filter dimension and so forth. So that was actually performed about 2 weeks into the notice to proceed. And those shop drawings were then verified by AWI, the manufacturer, which we sent to them, and just last month, at the end of December, we actually received the invitation, so we were delivered to site. So that was actually the longest lead item for this project. And then with that being said, we then scheduled the contractor to mobilize last week, January 13th. And right now, the first activities on the project are, as you may see there on the second bullet point, we want, filter 8 is offline right now. Filter 6 is offline, so we're working there, removing some of the media and also performing the crack repairs on the north walls of 8 and 7, as you may recall. But we'll be doing epoxy injection, and once we complete that activity, we're able to bring those filters back online and proceed with doing the remaining work on filters 3 and 4. So that's what we're doing now. The contractor is out there right now, carbon activated. They're still removing media. We're doing scaffolding and doing the epoxy injection. And then after we remove the media, then we'll proceed with doing work on the other laterals, demoing, and doing some crack repairs, the backwash troughs, resurfacing, and right now we're anticipated to be completed around April 11th this year. So we're full steam ahead. The contractor's out there daily and with our CM and KM utilizing the work. Next slide, please. And here are just some pictures of the actual filter base. On the left, filter 6 offline right now. And the reason that one's offline is because the earlier operators noticed that the media has been lowering. So that basically tells us that there's an underground failure. So that filter was taken offline last year. And then the cracks on filters 8, that was what those, we performed the structural analysis on that, and the recommendation was to repair those cracks and perform an epoxy injection, not just on 8 in the middle that has some of the longer cracks and so forth that we're concerned about, but also cracks on filter number 7 north wall, picture on the right. There's some cracks there. They're not heavily visible as 8, but obviously a concern, and we'll be doing the epoxy injection. And the task there right now is we're doing scaffolding along those walls, about 20 feet high, so to allow the contract that work. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Ray, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Next one up is our engineering intern here, Mawad. Worth noting here is the Joint West Basin. Last summer, he has a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Cal Poly, Pomona, and a master's in chemical engineering also from University of California, Irvine. So we wanted to use his expertise in evaluating our bioforest systems. Directors, you may know that our bioforest systems are used to for the nitrification process for the water that we send to the cooling towers. We rehabbed the bioforest system close to 10 years ago when the performance was going down. We trended down. And more recently, since the Hyperion offset, we've been noticing their performance going down too. We've received some requests from our contract operator to consider rehabbing those systems again. And so Mir is going to talk a little bit about the water quality and the system's performance. Mir?
Go ahead.
Hello, members of the board. So this is on page 69. I'll be presenting a study regarding the bioforest at each of the satellite plants. Now, this was originally inspired by a previous study I did, consisting of all the constituents that we were investigating at all the different satellite plants. And one that stood out was the ammonia concentration that specifically over the last like 3-4 years, starting around 2021, 2022, there's been more and more frequent spikes of ammonia at each of the satellite plants. And then each of those bars are the minimum average 95th, 98th, and 99th percentile. So those just higher percentiles just keep going up every year. And so this required some more investigation. So I would like to know also that all of the current limits are being surpassed right now, at least according to those graphs. We are adding chemicals to be compliance, but this is increasing the cost of the plant. And then next slide. So starting off with I guess the Carson Biofor, the Biofor at the JMM facility. There's only one, but looking at the past 8 years, looking from 2016 to 2024, it's been pretty consistent with the percentage of ammonia removal. But this Biofor is not exactly the best one to study because we're currently operating it at a reduced capacity. And therefore, we don't really know exactly how much max capacity has been affected over the previous last few years. The next few slides will show that a little more in detail. If we can go to the next slide. So the Chevron Biofors, we have 4 of them. Currently, if you can look at the 2021 date there, sorry, it's a little small, but that is sort of marking where it's starting to decrease down from the past, like 2016 to 2021, pretty consistent, and now it's like decreasing. This is very evident, at least in the Biofor number 3, which is the worst performing one out of the Chevron Biofors. And it's just not boding well for these ones. Now, next slide, please. So the Torrance Biofors are a little higher on average in terms of percentage of ammonia removal. But again, around that 2021 date, they do start to veer off and get lower and lower in terms of their ammonia removal percentage. So there is a clear trend between these satellite plants that I guess their lifespan is decreasing. This might require further investigation into the Biofors, maybe caused by the Hyperion upset. That's all I have for now. So thank you. Any questions?
On that one slide, why the gap in 23?
So
That we did have issues with our EDS system, for which we collect data and monitor data for an extended period of time. And it took us,
The Biofors were operating, we just were not
they were.
able to collect any data for.
And it's worth noting that the impacts that you see here, one of the impacts is that we end up using more chemicals to maintain the specification that our customers expect at each of the nitrification facilities.
Any questions or comments, Director Neal? And Director Gray? All right, well, thank you very much. It was a very nice presentation and congratulations. And LA County Sand is a big organization. What division are you gonna be working in?
wastewater collections division. Basically, plant stations.
Good luck to you. You'll have fun there and take advantage of the organization, move around.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there's any item that staff would like to present that needs special consideration by the board, we'll basically at the end.
Yeah, I would only say that there is a very brief summary in the presentation about the term sheet for Pure Water SoCal. We plan on coming back to the committee and the board next month to talk more about it. That is just a term sheet towards a water purchase agreement that at some point we would enter to with Metropolitan Water District. So something to just point out for the committee. Just a little heads up next month.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, with that, any closing comments from our directors?
Things are well organized in this division.
And Director Gray?
Yes, just thank you to staff and everyone who reported and the representative from LA Sanitation. Thank you.
I don't have any further comments. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to our newest member of the commission.